Do rest assured, none of this data will be used against you at any stage during the session or after. And I appreciate the session's been captured and recorded as well. For those watching it, I'm not sure that URL will be functional at whatever point in time you might choose to come to that site. All right, so as those results are coming in, I'm seeing already that there's a vast majority of you that have no background in Power BI. So it would be very unfair to dive directly into what developers can do with Power BI without fully describing what Power BI is. So the easiest way to describe it is that it is a data visualization service. I mentioned that my background is business intelligence. That's about connecting decision makers with relevant data so that they can be informed with up-to-date and accurate information. What you see before you then is an example of what Power BI can deliver as a set of visualizations. This is in fact a Power BI dashboard. And a Power BI dashboard's specialty is to deliver up-to-date information. Notice the absence of scrolling. At a single glance, you should be able to see key metrics and to be informed. It de-emphasizes the ability to interact because, of course, this is not a touch device. So everything that you should need to see is available to you in front of your eyes. I will apologize for the projector in this room because there really should be contrast. These are actually tiles. There's a dark grey background. If you came up here and looked at my laptop, you would see a much better looking dashboard, but the grey's been washed out here. Alrighty, 31 submissions, thank you. I will take this opportunity to start understanding who you are. So let's do an analysis of the audience this afternoon. No females submitted at this stage. I'm not so interested in gender and age group, but I really am interested in, and let me zoom in, to what your role in the room today is. And the vast majority, as we would expect at a developer conference, is that you're software developers. And so while we could talk for a week about what Power BI does and how we produce data solutions and reports, we're less interested today in that topic. We're more interested in targeting what you might do as application developers. All right, the other thing to focus on is your experience in the room. And so, as we would expect, a lot of you perhaps have heard about Power BI, but not a lot of experience in it. Looking at this result, would you care to guess what the average self-rating for experience in the room today is? Just a guess, what would you think? Somewhere between 0 and 1, possibly. Well, we would really discourage the need to guess, because what does guess end up doing? It ends up, making decisions on, estimates and approximations. Power BI supports a number of cool capabilities, including, up here in the top left corner, the ability to ask a natural language question. If I really want to know what the average rating is, I'll just start to type in, and with the support of IntelliSense here, I can find that the result is in fact accurately 1.13. And here at the top right-hand corner, I can choose to pin this back to the dashboard, return to the dashboard view, and you'll see that that's one approach to building up that dashboard to now monitor what the average self-rating in the room is. This is one such format for delivering analytics in Power BI. And to be honest, it's the least interesting for us, especially as developers, because what we can do is click through from the dashboard. And this typically happens when your questions evolve from how are we going, and perhaps there's some discrepancy or concern, your question evolves to, but why is that happening? And a root cause analysis might be better supported by a Power BI report that really emphasizes, for those people that have self-rated themselves as 0 background, by clicking on that column, an interaction supports a cross highlight. So I can see that 11 of those 15 are actually software developers. I can see what their age group is. I could navigate between pages on the report to see, where did you come from today? And perhaps that all-important question about what's most relevant to you based on the agenda set in this session, we see that perhaps the most interesting topic for you is how to develop these real-time dashboards, which will be the first topic I present to you this morning, or this afternoon. So that is a very brief introduction to what Power BI delivers. It is a cloud service allowing you to produce data solutions delivered through dashboards, reports, beyond the browser, native applications, but topical for application developers is how can I embed those dashboards, reports, even that Q&A experience directly into my own app. All right, that sets The outline for this session then. I've already started with a Power BI overview, and I'll recap that in a moment, and then we'll dive directly into what matters to application developers when working with Power BI. All right, so as an overview, already introduced it as a service for data analytics. The challenges that we have today is that we need to keep people informed and up to date, typically from data. All right, and the challenges we have in relation to that is that our data resides in multiple systems often, maybe on premises, maybe in the cloud. If it's in the cloud, it could be in our managed data service, or it could be a software as a service provider that hosts our data for us. So we have new challenges today on how we can bring together and perhaps integrate these data sets. And ultimately, and I've been teaching business intelligence now for almost 20 years, it's always about getting the right data to the right people in the right time at the right format. Here we have a modern service from Microsoft that addresses all of those concerns, and it's a cloud-based service. Now, for those that might be a little more familiar with Power BI, there is an on-premises service as well, known as the Power BI Reports Server, but it does not support dashboards. It does not support the embedding that we're talking about today, but it will support the custom visuals that we talk about today. So just be very careful there that the embedding that should appeal to you in your application is delivered only from the Power BI service hosted in the cloud. I'll use this slide very generally to say that yellow box describes any modern data source that you might have, whether it's a relational system, data sitting in flat file, big data systems, cloud services. Power BI can reach into, of course, with your permission, and access that data and make it available for reporting and dashboards. There's an extraordinary amount of capabilities, including the ability to add custom visuals, to share internally, externally, to embed. You've seen the natural language querying, and Power BI Desktop, completely out of scope, is the tool that is typically sitting on the desktop of a business analyst. They're going to produce models, reports, and publish them to the service. Where we'll start a conversation today is about the Power BI REST API and what that allows you to do with this cloud service. So let's get into Power BI for developers. There are three very interesting opportunities for you as developers to integrate, extend, and embed the Power BI experience. We'll start by talking about what the REST API can do for you, and one great example of what it delivers is the ability to push data to the service. So in fact, when you clicked submit on that simple survey, it simply pushed a row of data into the service, and the dashboard responds automatically. We'll talk very briefly about the ability to customize and deliver your own visuals. And then I'm going to let Laurent take over and talk about the very powerful capability to embed, whether they're reports, dashboards, or even that Q&A experience into your own application. All right then, so the REST API. There's lots of things that it can do. And I'll let Laurent talk about some of that later, but let me focus on delivering the real-time dashboard and explain to you how I achieved that dashboard that we started with. All right, one approach to achieve this is by using the REST API. Those real-time dashboards are designed to deliver up-to-date values. There are three different ways we can achieve this, and I don't want to go into the complexity now simply because 60 minutes won't do it justice. But to mention that there are two ways. You can push programmatically through the REST API, or there's also a streaming dataset approach as well. Architecturally, they're quite different, but the end result is that you will see real-time updates reflected on a dashboard. The reality is that both types will require programmatic development. All right, so generally when we talk about Power BI, there's a very strong story about self-service business intelligence, which is driving, typically business analysts that reside outside an IT department. We're empowering them with really productive and easy-to-use tools to deliver their solutions. What is out of scope for them is the delivery of a real-time dashboard, because it will involve writing code. All right, so a little bit more knowledge is required so that I can get through the demo. That when you sign up for Power BI, and by the way, sign up is free. You can go to powerbi.com, enter your email address, and then you'll be provided with a Power BI workspace that is a personal workspace. Think of this like a containment that will contain your content, like your data reports and dashboards. So within your workspace, you can add what are known as datasets. And these describe structure and they store data that become the source of reports and dashboards. Now, technically, a dataset is a collection of tables. Tables have columns with data types and names, and they have rows of data. So from a real-time dashboard perspective, we need to programmatically push a row or a batch of rows into a table of a dataset. Now, in order to do this, you need to achieve authentication with Azure Active Directory. That requires that you have an Azure app registered, that there are delegated permissions to the Power BI service, and that your code will need to authenticate with Azure AD via that app. So let me kick off my first demo by doing this. Just open up a new window here. And Microsoft like to make things really easy for us. So in fact, this is an older tool, but it fast tracks what's required to create that application to support the authentication. And simply at step 1, I just need to sign in. And I'm going to enter Labs 40. And you would just enter your credentials here. And step 1 should have achieved a sign-in. Step 2 is simply a matter of registering an application. Clicking Next. What will the application name be? I think NDC London 2019 is a good name. Will it be a server-side or native application? Today I will choose native. And then here are the permissions that you will delegate. You will enable the Power BI service to act on behalf. So I always choose the safe route when demoing because sometimes the demo demons get the better of you. But ordinarily, the principle of least privilege should kick in here. What is it absolutely that this app will need to do? If it doesn't need to create content, well, obviously don't delegate those permissions. But for today, I will simply go ahead and register. And what I have returned is the GUID, or the unique identifier of the application that was just created in Azure AD. Okay, that is a prerequisite. Moving forward then, you can authenticate with Azure AD with that app, and successful authentication would return to you a token. And when working with the Power BI REST API, the request response model, every request simply needs to have that token in the header. And then here is just a list of common operations, some of which are relevant for me when pushing data to produce a dashboard. But you'll see a number of them are simply to enumerate objects. In this workspace, what are the data sets? What are the reports? What are the dashboards that exist? And for a developer, that could be useful because you need to populate a drop-down list to allow your user to select from available reports. The fourth row down, the second one down, create a data set. We need to create a data set that will store a table of rows representing the survey results from my real-time dashboard. There is an operation to modify table definitions, but really where it becomes relevant for real-time dashboards is row number 5, adding a row to a table in a data set and potentially removing all rows. Laurent will talk to you later about the last one. When you're embedding Power BI content, you will use this REST API to request an embed token that will enable the embedding of particular content within a security context of your user into an application. All right, so what I like to do from a demo point of view is to run an application that I wrote purely for demonstration and educational purposes. You wouldn't ordinarily write an application that does this, but let me show you in the options that the options have essentially what you would store in a config file. Like, what are the endpoints to the service? What is the application ID that will be used during authentication? Let me copy that and paste that in. So I'll stress that again. Ordinarily, you're not going to ask your end users to do this, but in demonstration, I've just updated a config file. And then I go ahead and perform a connect. And this is where your application would challenge the user and ask them to enter their Power BI or their Office 365 account. So this is admin online labs 40.onmicrosoft.com. And assuming that authentication succeeds, note this response that says, oh, by the way, this is the first time you're authenticating with an application that has these delegated permissions. Are you cool with that? Are we cool with that? Do we ever ask ourselves that question? Like, you just install some new amazing app that everybody's talking about, and the first thing it does is says, I need to access your photographs and contacts. Are you okay with that? Or do you just click, okay, I want to use this really cool new app? Is that what you do? I do think carefully. Like, I come from Melbourne and we're a tram city, and I thought it was amazing that the tram tracker wanted access to my photographs. If you approve that, you're basically delegating to the app that it can act on your behalf with your identity. You want to be very careful about it. So it's really an important prompt here. Do we trust the application itself to be responsible with my identity? And of course, I'm developing this, so I'm going to accept that. That's probably another good reason not to be greedy when delegating permissions to that app. On a needs basis is what you should be delegating. All right, sorry, we're having trouble signing you in. The response reply URL does not match the response type. Let me try that again. Copy this. I'm a little bit suspicious of something. Azure. I was trying to keep those demo demons away. Let me just show you in Azure AD what that application looks like, because I'm slightly suspicious of something here. So when I come to the Azure portal and I take a look at the app registrations that have taken place, we should see that there's one for NDC London 2019. Here it is. There is the application ID, so I'm going to copy that again to the clipboard. And I'm going to look at its settings while I'm here. Okay, and then I'll rerun this app, and we're all collectively going to cross our fingers, because there's not much I can do if this doesn't succeed. So, pasting that application ID in. I'm just conscious that maybe this redirect URI is different. Sign in redirect. So I'm just going to switch back here and copy what the tool created for me and paste it in. Yes, it's different. Somebody's changed something on your team. Now that it has everything required to authenticate, we try again. Aha, and that's exactly what I wanted to see. What my application has done has cached the AD token, which is valid, I think, for 90 days. Cached in the application, that means using the REST API now, I just have to ensure that that is embedded into the request. Now, if I have a look at the workspaces available to me, there's a REST API operation to do this. And I see there's one called NDC London, which is in fact where this dashboard resides. See here, the workspace is NDC London. So I will create a new data set to support my real-time dashboard. And what it needs is a definition. Remember, a data set is a collection of tables. Tables are described in terms of columns. And I have a snippets file that is going to allow me to simply copy and paste the definition of a data set right here. A data set named e-commerce with a single table named browsing, consisting of 4 columns with these names and types. So I simply copy that and into my tool, paste the JSON document, watch in a moment how real-time works. But before I do, there's one other consideration for this data set. What will happen as it accumulates data? Now, if you don't set a retention policy and the row count exceeds 5 million in a table, you're done. There's a limit that you've reached. But there is the basic FIFO that says it will keep a rolling 200,000 rows, that as you keep pushing rows of data in, older data will simply be dropped out. So you're guaranteed never to arrive at that limit of 5 million rows. Now I'm going to click OK, and I want you to watch where I'm pointing right now. There's in the Power BI portal shows us evidence that the data set was created. And the default behavior when you click on a data set is that it brings up the report design canvas. The intention, of course, is that I want to build a report visualization over the data set, and we see the definition of the data set right here in the fields pane. A single table name browsing, and we see 4 fields. Now, of course, there's no data yet in that data set, but what I'm going to do is just build out a visualization here that says, show me the count of products. So how many rows of data are being loaded, and then I'll produce another visualization that is a bar chart that would show me the number of categories and the count of products in those categories. Now, nothing looks amazing yet because we don't have any data, but as a prerequisite for a dashboard, you have to have a report built first. So I'm going to call this my e-commerce report, and now that the report is saved, I can then hover over each of these 2 visuals, and using the pin here, I can pin these to create a new dashboard that will be called e-commerce. So there's one visual, pin the second visual, and then here on my left pane, I can navigate to my new e-commerce dashboard, and there it is. That is technically a real-time dashboard, but not very exciting because no data yet is being pushed to it. So returning to this educational tool, I can use the API to interrogate the tables within a data set, and then I've built in the ability to push data, either as a single JSON document, and let me copy this next document here, which is pushing a single row. And you can see here the column name value pairs. All right. Now watch with the dashboard in the background, and when I push that row of data, there's basically an instant update to the service. All right, so I have no doubt in this room that you're very familiar with JSON and how to work with these services. It's very simple once you've got the infrastructure set up. You've defined your data set, you've got the authentication happening. And what I'll do next is just simulate a realistic set of data. So I'm simply just going to load in some data. So these are some events that have happened. I've got some policy here that says, yeah, of that data, just randomly choose between 10 and 20 and just keep pushing them to the service and put the current date and time into the timestamp. And there it is. It's just randomly pushing batches of data up there. So give consideration to what data you work with today and how you might, with relative ease, go and update an existing application that, for example, in a school system, when a new student is enrolled, continue to insert the data into the database, but also push a row to Power BI so that the administrators at the school who are monitoring progress can see those updates straight away. All right, so we see some great examples of just taking existing applications and allowing real-time delivery to Power BI to support monitoring. Now, by the way, if I had the app on the phone, that's real-time sitting on my phone. If I had an Apple Watch, I could have real-time results sent to my watch and even alerts notifying me when thresholds are exceeded. So just as a recap, I want to know what data sets are in a workspace. Well, send a request, and the response comes back as a JSON document. There are 2 data sets that you might display in a drop-down list. I want to push rows to the service. Well, a post request, and I'll point out here, to your data sets and to the unique identifier of a data set within its tables to the product table, go ahead and push, in this case, a single row. But you can comma separate up to 10,000 rows in a single push. All right, so that was the first demonstration. There are a list of restrictions. I'm not going to read through them. This presentation is available for download, and I'll give you a link for that if it's relevant. But a couple of key ones to point out is that a table may only have a maximum of 5 million rows, but we can overcome that by using the basic FIFO, as I did in the demo. Maximum rows per single push, 10,000. Maximum rows per hour, 1 million. Now, we'll talk briefly about licensing in a later topic in this session, but this could be achieved on the free license for Power BI. Okay, there's no requirement that you have to pay for enterprise licensing to get real-time dashboards. Okay. Let's move on to the second topic relevant to developers, and that's the ability to work with custom visualizations. Now, you may have noticed that when I was building out that report, that available to us out of the box is like some 25 visuals. You know, your common tables, your bar charts, pie charts, they're all there. But a really interesting story, especially for developers that have web graphic drawing skills, whether it's D3, is that you can bring those skills together with data and to produce the visualizations that work most effectively for your audiences. And it's all achieved quite easily from the end user perspective, that what they can do is click on the ellipsis here and import a custom visual file. Now, that custom visual file could come from Microsoft's marketplace, where there's a growing number of Microsoft-developed but also community-developed custom visuals, or simply from a file that you've handed off internally of what you've developed as your own custom visual. So I like to point this one out. Let's have a look. I've already got a report of your survey results, and arguably, you know, this bar chart is pretty boring. You know, what could we do with a custom visual? So I'm going to edit the report, and I'm just going to demonstrate how I could import from the marketplace. And one of my favorites for demonstration purposes, and I'm yet to find an opportunity in real world to use it, is one called the Enlighten Aquarium. So let's go ahead and narrow down the search, and we'll find that we can simply click Add here, and it downloads and imports the custom visual file. And then we find it available here as a new visual to use. All right, so I simply select this boring bar chart, and I switch the visualization type to become the Enlighten Aquarium. All right, so what I love about this is you're really constrained by your imagination and skill. There's an entire framework that Microsoft delivered to you, enabling you to kickstart a project and then enhance it with whatever logic required to deliver the data that makes sense for you. You'll find that there's also the ability to control whatever you want through exposing properties. Like, for example, we don't so much like fish, but we really like the idea of sharks. All right, and then when I hover over this, I can see there's those 25 people that submitted surveys that were software developers. All right, I'm going to go ahead and save that. And I'm going to pin the sharks up to the dashboard so we have real-time sharks now. And then when I return to the survey dashboard, we can dismiss this old bar chart, and we can now monitor real-time what your roles are through the size of these sharks. Okay, so the story about custom visuals. Create what makes sense for you. One of my customers is an airline. What makes sense to them? Like a thermometer showing temperature, they want to see an aeroplane that as passenger load increases to full, they want to see like a mercury line. Cool, we'll just develop that for you, and then you can throw it in your reports, your dashboards, and it will work through the whole ecosystem through phones and so on. So that is my brief demonstration. If I was to show you actually how to develop them, that's probably a 90-minute task, okay? And it's not for the faint-hearted, and that's not to discourage anybody. It's simply that the skill set required for custom visuals is quite steep. But just to give you the overview, when it comes to the life cycle of creating and also managing your custom visuals, because the Power BI service goes through frequent updates with improvements and new features, is that also the custom visual capabilities update as well. So there's also a life cycle and version management that you can work within. There is the custom visual tool that is free and easy to install, and it allows you to create, test, package up to produce that custom visual file. It's all done through a versioned API. The testing is done through the Power BI service. So essentially, you host your custom visual on your developer machine, and you allow the service to communicate with your machine to test it real time in a report. Okay, these are the skills typically required. You're not constrained to use Visual Studio. You can use any tool on any OS, but it's very much JavaScript, TypeScript development. And of course, you'll typically need strong web drawing skills. You are, by the way, completely abstracted from having to write queries. That's all done through the framework. All right, so no need to understand SQL or MDX or DAX or whatever language, and it will work across any Power BI model, including the real-time dashboards. They are the first two topics, and at that stage, I hand the baton over to Laurent, because it's his team in Israel that are responsible for delivering the APIs and services that drive the embedding of all of that great reports and dashboards into your own app. Laurent.
Thanks, Peter. I want to talk about you today about the Power BI embedded analytics product that is, in fact, the ability to embed Power BI content like reports and dashboards in your own application. So basically, it works on iframe. You embed the Power BI content in an iframe, and it relies on the HTML5 and JavaScript technology. And it can work with web application, mobile application. And you will see later that it's very simple to do that using the Power BI JavaScript API we supply. So this is a list of what we can embed. This is all the kind of visualization existing in Power BI. You have reports, dashboards, visuals that are part of reports, or single dashboard tiles. You can also embed the Q&A experience. And this is natural language experience.
That was the one I demonstrated. So in fact, a common thing that application developers will want to embed are reports, because they drive interactivity. They allow the user to slice, dice, filter, cross-highlight. You can embed dashboards, but they're really boring inside an app. So the point of this slide, you can embed anything that Power BI has on offer, but the most compelling experience is in the entire reports that we'll demo here for you this afternoon.
Okay, and of course, the content embedded in your app is not publicly available. You need to restrict the data visibility to the relevant users, and it can be done in two ways. It depends if your application is for external customer or inside your organization. This is the two scenarios in embedded analytics. The internal app scenario is embed for your organization. In this scenario, the end user is a Power BI user inside your org, and you can embed the Power BI visualization in other apps. You can embed in SharePoint Online or in a custom UX. And the external application embed for your customers is the most relevant for ISVs. In this scenario, the end user is external. The app, the application authenticates the user, so it's totally transparent to Power BI. And in order to give access to the end user, the application will need to generate some kind of token. We call it an embed token, to give the right permissions to see the content.
So I guess in the context of the applications you developed today, the most common scenario we're seeing is that you're going to embed on behalf of the users of your application. Now, your application's probably already mature. You have an identity store, you perform authentication, you probably even have a profile against each user that authenticates with your app. This is a common scenario, and you should never expect that that user has to have a license with Power BI. They may never have even heard about Power BI, and it doesn't matter if they haven't. But this external app says that your application will authenticate with Power BI by using what's known as a master app account. There's a licensing consideration that we'll talk about briefly, but the end user does not have to authenticate with Power BI. It is the most common example I think we're seeing today of embedding. The internal app is less common because the Power BI portal, powerbi.com, delivers a fairly rich experience for navigation and accessing content. We might see the embed of that because a large company in particular doesn't like the look and feel. You know, they want to have their company branding and they want to structure things in the way that makes sense to them. So there's very different types of embed in your application for external users or a new experience for those that already have licenses to work with Power BI. We'll probably focus more on the external app, the more common scenario, especially for ISVs.
The licensing for the external app scenario is not a user-based license because we're not about the user, but it's more a company-based license. I will talk about that later. So let me show you now. This is, we call it the Hello World application of Power BI Embedded. This is a very quick tool, that 5 steps that you need to follow to have a sample application to embed content. So let's click on that.
So very much in the theme of your first experience should be really simple and get you fast-tracked. And then we'll go back and talk about in detail what it really does.
Yeah, so
here's the junction. Are you doing an embed on behalf of your customer or for your organization? And the other way I like to refer to them is PaaS or SaaS. The embedding for your application users is PaaS embedding, platform as a service. Whereas if you're embedding on behalf of Power BI users that already have a license, it's SaaS embedding. So there's the 2 options that you have available here. Is it not behaving?
yeah, let's do it from here.
Some conflicts of tokens on my virtual machine.
Yeah. So we are interested in the embed for your customer scenario. So we just need to, first we need to sign in with the users that will make the call to the REST APIs. So
this could be you signing in with your org account. You don't necessarily need a Power BI license to begin with, right?
Yes. So you need a Power BI Pro license, but there is a trial of 60 days. You can start with a free trial for 60 days, and this is one account.
So we're going to sign in with an account that has never been used for Power BI before to show you what it might look like the first time you do this.
Connect to this account.
There's a comma. And because this password hasn't been, or this account hasn't been signed in before, we're just going to have to update the password.
Okay.
And this part's important, right? So there are some minimum requirements when you're going to do PaaS embedding with Power BI. And one of the requirements is that you still need to authenticate with the service. It's with an account that we'll refer to as a master app account, and it must meet a licensing requirement, which is, has a Power BI Pro license. Now, because this is a fast-tracking tool, and you might be evaluating it, it would be very, let's just say, mean-spirited, and maybe not in Microsoft's interest to make it difficult for you to evaluate. So Microsoft will provide you a 60-day free trial of a Pro license, enabling you to do embedding at no cost. And that's what it's asking you. Are you okay to accept this free 60-day trial to meet that minimum requirement?
Okay. So now I accepted the trial, and we are good to go. The next thing we need to do here is to register an application, similarly to what Peter showed before. So let's just give a name. Okay. And here I will select all the permission, but it's not a good practice.
We've had that discussion.
Yeah.
Principle of least privilege applies.
So now we have the application with the application ID. The second thing I need here is an app workspace. In order to embed the content, you need a workspace, a Power BI workspace.
Okay, so a personal workspace is insufficient for embedding. We need to create what's known as an app workspace. And this is generally a tool that supports collaboration and distribution. Unlike a personal workspace that I used in my demos, an app workspace is owned by a membership that's fluid. All right, so here he's gone ahead and created an app workspace. The tool is then giving you an opportunity to even kickstart with some sample content, so you don't even need to have content to begin with. Yeah. Which one are you going to use?
You can also upload your own report if you have a PBIX file created with Power BI Desktop. So this is what I will do now. 3.
So a Power BI Desktop file encapsulates a data model and a report. It's the desktop tool that a business analyst might use to create a data model and then a fantastic report to support interactive experiences over it. And that's now going to be uploaded as part of step 4. Yeah. And then final step 5.
And in step 5, we just grant permissions, the permissions we selected in step 2 to the application.
So it allows you now, not when the user of your application is looking at a report, it's allowing you right now to confirm that that master app account accepts those permissions.
Yeah. Okay, so we are done with this tool. All the relevant info about what we just set up now, application, workspace, and report can be found in this summary. And you can also download the sample application that embeds a Power BI report. Okay. Let's open the solution. And if I look at this configuration file in the sample solution, it's already filled with the identifier of the application.
Let's test the audience, actually. What's missing here? What's not been filled in automatically? Just a glance at the config app settings. Password, right. So it would be very irresponsible if you just downloaded a file and that password was embedded in there. So as Laurent will do now, he just has to paste that in. Of course, yes. That's not even a great thing either. You probably want to encrypt before doing so. So in a demo and in classroom situations, we're going to do something that we would otherwise not encourage you to do. Clear text of a password.
I hope I remember the password.
I hope you can remember the password.
I think it was that. Okay.
That's it, isn't it? You've downloaded a sample app. You had to adjust one thing by putting your password into the web.config or the app.config. What's next?
What's next? We will run the application. Oh, it's not the same shortcuts. Okay, let's run it on Google Chrome.
That'll do. Still loading. There we go.
Okay. So now I will click on the Embed Report button, and it will embed the report we uploaded to the workspace. Okay, so this is a sample HTML file with many div elements and in an iframe with the Power BI report embedded.
Fully interactive. So what that fast track has done for you is abstracted you from the need to know the mechanics. It's really about, let's just get you up and running. And of course, you can spend time later dissecting the application and understanding the code behind it. But essentially what your app has done, it had to authenticate with Azure AD using the registered app. On success of that, it cached a token. And then it reached into the workspace, and using the REST API, it found the first report in the workspace. And then it's embedded it into an iframe. In order to do that, it had to generate an embed token. So using the access token, it made a request for a particular content item, retrieved the embed token, and then client-side, the JavaScript API has called a very simple method called powerbi.embed. You pass the div that you want to embed into, you pass an object that represents all of your configuration information, including the token for embedding, and voila, you have an embedded report, completely interactive within your application.
Yeah. So you can start from the sample application and extend it to develop your own application or take a reference from it.
All right, and no restriction, custom visuals are supported as well.
Yeah. Okay, a little bit about JavaScript API. In the sample application, we use only the most basic functionality of the JavaScript API, that is embed content. But especially for reports, we have a full set of functionalities. You can interact with the visual. You can set the filters and the slicers, define the visual programmatically. You can navigate to the report pages.
So the way I like to summarize it is, pretty much anything that a human can do when interacting with the report can be done programmatically in response to what your application's doing. For example, your application loads up the profile of a customer. Go ahead and open up a page showing a particular page of a report and enforce a filter on the customer that they've launched from. So there's this awesome capability to seamlessly integrate your application experience with Power BI, and also it's bidirectional. When they click on, for example, if you go back to that report, when they click on something like, is it still running?
It's closed.
It's not running. If there was a pie chart and they clicked on a slice of the pie, the application can be notified that they've clicked on the pie representing UK sales, and your application can respond in a meaningful way by perhaps loading some data from a database. So you've got this beautiful blending of reporting analytics with operational applications, and they can talk to one another. And I think they've done a great job in the engineering team of, over the last 2 years, building up this list of operations that the JavaScript API client side will support to communicate with the asset, or for the asset to communicate with the application. You'll notice also the 4 there with Harry Potter lightning strikes. No, it's not Harry Potter. Nothing to do with it, but they're events that your application could subscribe to. Tell me when the user changes a page. I might want to do something in my application with that. And yet there's more.
You can embed any kind of visualization. You can embed a single report visual.
Yeah, it might be just that
dashboard.
pie chart. I don't want the whole page or the report. I just want that pie chart embedded into my report.
You can embed dashboard or single dashboard tiles, and you can embed also the Q&A experience.
And don't overlook how awesome that makes your application, that you've now got an interactive, like a bot there, that allowing them to ask questions, it responds with not a sentence, but with a visualization of data. And so no longer do we have to write lots of reports in anticipation of what all of these questions might possibly be. A well-designed Power BI solution can be queried through natural language questions. English, and I believe Spanish is still in preview. All right, so very easy to make, take your application to a new level by providing interactive data visualization requests.
Okay, so now I will go quickly explain you how you can explore the capabilities of the JavaScript SDK. The most efficient way is to look at this tool. This is a playground for the JavaScript SDK of Power BI Embedded, and you can here embed a sample, a report, or any kind of other content. So this is what you need to embed the embed token, embed URL, and the report ID. And then we can just click on run. It will run the code that is in this window.
So what's amazing about this playground, and I think that's a good choice of word to describe this tool, is that anything that the JavaScript API can do has been built into the playground to let you explore and experiment with a sample report. So in fact, what you see on the left-hand side is that you want to view an embedded report. The embed token, embed URL, and report ID are hard-coded in there. They're actually a sample report that Microsoft will let you embed. And then when Laurent clicked run, there's all of the client-side code that will embed the report into the div, which you see the report below us. But that's just the beginning. That's just showing you how to embed a report. When he then switches across to the, was it the interact?
The interact. Once the report is loaded, you can click on the interact tab, and then you will see the full set of functionalities of interaction you can do with the report. So you can get the ID of the report components, page and visual. You can navigate the report. You can get and set the filters and slicer state. Edit, save the report. You can customize the layout of the report to fit it to the need of your application.
So that slide we had with all those tiles, saying all the things you can do, here they are, allowing you to apply them on a live report. So let's have a look at the filters and slices. So if we expand that grouping, there's one that says set report filters. So when Laurent clicks it, here's the client-side code that you would need, to respond to a button click. Laurent then can click run, and we'll see that a filter is enforced automatically. Now that could be, let's navigate from the customer profile we're looking at to the report filtering on that customer. And so what I love about this application is it shows you the full capability. It's updated at least every month. The news that you see there are new capabilities that came out a couple of months ago. There's the code you can copy and paste, so you can be quite productive and efficiently, we borrow these days more than work things out from scratch. And you've got a sample report that's been built specifically to show you all of the capabilities. That report supports things like bookmarks and so on. So it's great to become familiar with what you can do, and when you're ready, copy the code and adapt it to your own app.
Yeah, you can also find in this tool, I will not show it now, but showcases that are more complete use cases you can achieve in your application using the JavaScript API. You can find here also documentation. So I encourage you to visit this tool.
Okay, that's awesome.
And okay, a little bit about licensing. So basically, we have two kinds of licensing. So the Power BI Premium license that is typically for enterprises, and we have also a resource in the Azure cloud. And then Power BI Embedded, it is more for ISV, but there is no restriction of what you need to buy. Typically, the premium SKU, EM and P SKU are more used by enterprise because it's an Office SKU, it's in a yearly or monthly commitment, and the Azure SKU is good for developers or for the development stage because it gives full elasticity. You can scale up, scale down the resource.
So let me clarify. The two embed types that we introduced earlier, whether it was PaaS embedding for your app users, these users do not have Power BI direct access or licensing, versus SaaS embedding that these people do have Power BI licenses. You don't have to worry about licensing for SaaS embedding. You're already using the user's identity and their license. But for PaaS embedding, Microsoft won't give anything away. You have to pay to perform embedding for your application users. They'll provide you 3 SKUs to do so, Azure and Power BI Premium. There's a more detailed discussion that you probably need to consider, and we'll give you some great resources, and this presentation really summarizes the 3 here, the 3 SKUs available for PaaS embedding. What we will point out is that the A SKU for Azure is really simple, especially for you guys as developers that are looking to perhaps evaluate or build a proof of concept. Because you can simply go to the portal, of course, if you have rights, and you can fire up an Azure resource. And A1 is very cost effective at US $1 per hour, and it's a pausable resource. So when you've finished your testing, pause it. So it's not going to cost you a lot of money to simply get an application up and running for evaluation. When you're ready to deploy to production, you will have to have either scale up the A to support the load and concurrency, or move to Power BI Premium licensing that supports embedding, and in addition, enterprise capabilities for Power BI, like larger data sets, incremental refresh, and all of these really cool things that Power BI offers. So it's actually a complex discussion to have to arrive at what is the suitable licensing for you. Today, we just want to let you know, for PAS embedding, you will need to commit to one of these SKUs by subscription. And the choice of that will require further research, and this slide deck will give you the appropriate links to start that research. Okay.
Okay, we'll let Peter conclude.
Awesome. So how are we going for time? Okay, that's working out reasonably well. The objective of the 60-minute session was to help appeal to you what the developer capabilities for this data analytics service is, or are. So what we covered was the ability for you to use the Power BI REST API, and one such application of that is the ability to push data to the service to deliver real-time updates through dashboards. We saw very quickly, for those that are inclined to work visually, that there's an extensibility capability for the visuals themselves, an entire framework that lets you develop the visuals that make sense to your target audiences, and you may use them internally, or you may even share them through the marketplace with Microsoft if they pass their rigorous tests. But perhaps the most compelling story for developers is that all of this amazing capability to visualize and distribute reports and dashboards can also be embedded into your own applications. All right, there's an entire story about how that happens, and we'll encourage you to join us this afternoon. We actually have 2 workshops in a different room on this floor where if you've got a laptop, we're happy to guide you through those tools and get you up and running with a sample embed. All right, I think I mentioned those workshops. There's the slide on them at 4:20 this afternoon. If you want to join us, feel free to. I think it's in room number 4. If you want to just come and watch and join into a deeper discussion. So as we move through things, we have time to actually talk about what we're doing. The remainder of this presentation is just a lot of links, but they're relevant to helping you take your knowledge to the next level from what was discussed today, including these amazing samples that Laurent demonstrated, including also FAQ pricing and how you're going to make those decisions. Now, I know I've gone through that very quickly, but the last slide I'm going to leave up is this one. If you want to download the entire deck as a PDF, feel free to do so. We've arrived at the end of this session. Not a lot of time for questions. We'll welcome them offline, or please come join us at the workshop at 20 minutes past the hour. But otherwise, we'd like to both thank you for your time, attendance, and interest in this session. We hope that this energizes you to think about how Power BI might take your applications to the next level. Thank you.